So welcome everybody, and good morning. My name's Mary Grillo. I'm the chair of the San Diego Museum of Art Docent Guest Lecture Series. And this is just one of the Docent Council programs in our work to foster a welcoming and inclusive museum experience through empathy-based learning, exploration, and conversation about the arts. We operate out of the San Diego Museum of Art, located in Balboa Park, which is unceded land of the Kumeyaay Nation. So I'm very excited to start off our year in the guest lecture series with our guest. But before I do that, introductions, I would like to recognize those who helped make this program possible. The museum staff who publicize our series through social media, B. Baratza, our docent chair, and of course, my partners in crime, David Miles and Doug McMenemy. I am very excited to announce that we will be returning to our in-person conversations with the help of the MOPA media team. We will now be able to meet in person in their auditorium. Please join us on October 20th for a conversation with our curator, Anita Feldman, the Deputy Director of Curatorial Affairs and Education at the Curatorial Affairs at the SDMA, and artist Carlo Miranda, who currently has a wonderful exhibition of hyper-realistic portraits in our museum. So, and David, do you happen to have a visual of?
Yes.
Thank you. Look at Carlo and then I'll.
Yep.
There we go. So some of you may have seen his works, and we're very excited to have him come and have a conversation with us about his motivation and life experience that led him to his art. Also, very exciting, we have a new exhibition coming in October 28th, 2023, Korea in Color, which we are working in partnership with our peers in Korea and with the Korean Embassy. So it's very exciting, and we're looking forward to having everybody come to see these wonderful, colorful artworks. So, a bit of housekeeping. Please enter any of your questions that you may have for our panel in the chat function, and David will moderate our conversation. Also, please remember to mute your audio. So today we are honored to have Iranian artist Mohammad Barrangi, who is now based in the UK. His layered artistic practice combines contemporary printmaking with Iranian illustrated manuscript traditions to explore narratives about personal experience and identity, as well as more universal themes. Much of the artist's repertoire carries an extra layer relating directly to his experience as an immigrant trying to find their way in a diasporic world, but all of Barrangi's work is layered with elements that appear to be added at random, yet in a deliberate manner to create the final collage. SDMA acquired its first work by Barrangi in 2021 with funds raised by the museum's patrons of the arts of Iran and the Persian Cultural Center of San Diego. In addition, I would like to thank the Farhang Foundation, a nonprofit organization based in LA dedicated to promoting Iranian arts and culture. They agreed to join SDMA as a cultural partner for this event and for the live art installation the artist plans to do on October 5th and 6th of this year. I hope you will all join us if you're in San Diego. Today, we are delighted to have Dr. Ladan Akbarnia join us in our conversation and facilitate our discussion. She will also may be providing some translation for Mohammad Barrangi. Dr. Akbarnia comes to our museum with over 20 years of curatorial and research experience in the arts of the Islamic world, in particular from Iran, Central Asia, and India. She has published extensively on a variety of topics, including cross-cultural transmissions between Iran and East Asia, Sufism and Islamic art, and contemporary Middle Eastern art. Now, I will turn it over to Ladan to introduce Roshi Rahnama, founder and director of ADVOCARTSY, an Iranian contemporary art platform and gallery, who will also be joining our conversation today. Thank you.
Sorry, Ladan, we are now. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. I was just saying I didn't think there would be an intro for me today, but thank you so much, Mary, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here today to talk with Mohammad Barrangi as well as Roshi Rahnama. Before I introduce Roshi, I just wanted to add a couple of details about Mohammad that I think are important to when he begins to tell us a bit about his practice as well. That we know he was born and raised in Iran. He came to the United Kingdom. When did you arrive, Mohammad? A few years ago.
7 years ago.
Okay, so 7 years ago. So he is an immigrant to the UK. And he's not only globally recognized as an illustrator and artist, but also as an athlete who's represented Iran in the 100-meter sprint. So I think this is a nice sort of fact about you. And as well, he's very open about his sort of simultaneous identity as artist and athlete, and also the fact that he was born without full mobility in his left arm. And so he's developed a unique artistic practice, which he'll share with us, that uses his right hand and both of his feet, to create the works that we'll see. And so he blends these different elements of traditional calligraphy, even Persian bookmaking traditions, which you'll see in the outlines of his work. Even right behind Roshi, you'll see an example of that. And also that his education is, he has a degree in graphic design from Azad University in Iran. And also he's also graduated from the Royal Drawing School in London recently with successful exhibitions and a lot of awards and recognitions. So, and his works are collected by private public collections in the UK, as well, including the British Museum, including the Royal Collection, and then also here in the United States, I know at least of LACMA, of private collectors, as well as our own collection, which Mary, I think, might have mentioned about a piece that we've acquired, which we'll get to. So the reason why I bring those up is because it brings me to Roshi, because a lot of what I know about Mohammad and a lot of what our knowing or introduction to Mohammad Barrangi has been through this collaboration and work that Mohammad has done with Roshi Rahnama. And who is Roshi Rahnama? For those of you who don't know, those of you who know, she doesn't need an introduction, but she is the founder and director of ADVOCARTSY, which is a platform with a permanent space that's located in West Hollywood. You should really take some time, if you live nearby, to go and see her gallery, that promotes the art of artists of Iranian origin. But I think that she not only promotes the work that artists do, she promotes the work that curators are trying to do in museums. She has been instrumental in helping us build our own collection of Iranian contemporary art at the San Diego Museum of Art. So I'm so pleased that she's here today, and I insisted that she come because I want, she and Mohammad have been working together for 6 or 7 years. And so when I ask him questions today, I'm going to also bring her in to get her perspective. And then we'll finish with a kind of collective conversation about what it means to be working together in these from these three different angles: artist, museum, and platform galleries on that end of it. So I think we'll go ahead and start. First of all, I want to also wish those who are celebrating a Happy New Year, Shana Tova to those who celebrate, but also a very warm welcome. Kheli khoshalam. This is to our Iranian and Persian speakers in the audience. خیلی خوشحالم که شما هم امروز اینجا هستین. ببخشید که فارسی من با لهجه خیلی غلیظ امریکایی. امیدوارم که اگر سوالی داشتین آخر سر شما هم بپرسین. محمد و من و روشی هم سعی می‌کنیم که این صحبتامونو هم به فارسی صحبت کنیم هم به انگلیسی. This is an unusual format today. It shouldn't be unusual. It's bilingual. I'm so pleased that San Diego is able to do this and to make this program accessible to Persian speakers as well as English speakers. So thanks for putting up with all of this. But I will now go ahead. Mohammed, are you ready? Hazarin, first question.
Yes, sure.
And I will say as well, Mohammed gives most of his, he'll respond in Persian in his native language. This is what he does as a standard practice at conferences and talks, as I think has been said. And I will do my best to capture the beauty of what he says in my translation. Okay, so let me just pull together, just pull up my questions, which are also on the same screen. Okay, Mohammed, looking at your body of work, there seems to be a theme that comes up a lot in your titles, in your works. So just to give others who may not be familiar an idea, dreamscape, fantasyland, wonderland, once upon a time, even the Conference of the Birds, which references this mystical journey of these birds to find the mythical bird king or Seymour, something we'll come back to. There seems to be this interest in dreams, fantasies, mythologies, perhaps this sense of another world. Could you tell us about a little bit about what these titles mean to you, and also whether they come before the work or after the work is completed?
برای من همیشه اینطوریه که من در کارهام قبل از اینکه طراحی کنم یا قبل از اینکه کارهام شکل بگیره فکر میکنم که در یک دنیای دیگری زندگی میکنم و اسم اون دنیا هست دنیای عجیب یا وندرلند.
اوکی، من از ایشون پرسیده بودم که تم تایتلا اسمای برای کارشون چی بوده و چرا همشون یه حالتی دارن راجع به خواب یا یه دنیای دیگه خواب دیدن. So he's saying, Mohammed is saying that before he works, he feels this sense that he's in another world, which he calls دنیای عجیب or wonderland. And so I'm going to go ahead. And so we're seeing images of some of these works as he's discussing them. So
و همینطور که در واقع توی بیشتر کارها می‌بینید همیشه حیوانات ترکیب شدن با آدم‌ها و کاراکترهایی که استفاده می‌کنم قاعدتاً همیشه چهره خانم‌ها هست توی کارها و این بخش فکر می‌کنم به سزای کارم هست که توی کارام همیشه میگم حیوان‌ها و انسان‌ها با همدیگه گفتگو می‌کنن.
Okay, so he's saying, as you'll see in my work, David's taking us back and forth between some of these images. You'll see, like in this image, you have birds with the head of a woman. That in most of his work, he features a combination of people and creatures, and that these live together, and they sort of are in harmony in a shared world.
و همینطور که در واقع یکی از چیزهایی که خیلی تو کارم دوست دارم اینه که کارهام ترکیب شده با دنیای واقعی خودم و زندگی خودم، مثل اینکه کاراکترهای من همشون یک دست دارن، به این خاطر که من به همین شکل به دنیا آمدم و هرگز دو دست رو تجربه نکردم و تو تمام کارهای من کاراکترها یک دست دارن و اون ارتباطیه که من همیشه با کاراکترام دارم اینطوریه که خودم رو گاهی اوقات جای اون کاراکترها میذارم.
So he's saying that one of the things that he really likes, he really loves about his own work, is that they're really aligned with his own self and his own life. They all have one hand, like he has. You see, and he relates to them largely. It's almost as though he could be one of them.
و این علاقه من به گفتگو با کاراکترهام باعث میشه که یک داستانی همیشه براشون بسازم توی ذهنم که این داستان در نهایت تبدیل شده به نوشته های من و کارهای من.
Okay, so and this his interest in these conversations that he creates through his works with his characters, it inspires him to create stories about them. He has these characters, he has these conversations, and so then this comes to the story that he builds from the it's like the ingredients of a story. That part I've just added in myself. I want to just ask you, Mohammad, as well, is this how the title kind of comes out of the story? It's almost the story is there and
توی کارهای من فکر میکنم ایده هایی که میادش برام که کارم شکل میگیره در نهایتش این هستش که به اون اتفاقاتی که پشت سر گذاشتم یا به صورت روزمره باهاش در ارتباط بودم خیلی تاثیر بسزایی داره، چون معتقدم که یک آرتیست و حالا خود من نگاهم خیلی به زندگیه و این زندگی رو دوست دارم تو کارهامم در واقع تاثیرش رو داشته باشه دیگه. حالا میتونه یا خیلی ناراحت باشم این شکل بگیره یا خیلی خوشحال باشم، ولی در هر صورت نگاهم همیشه به نوعی به زندگی بوده و بعد شکل گرفته کارم.
Okay, so he's saying that the ideas that come and take shape in his work, these also come from, I mean, you'll see that if you look at this is Ladan talking, you'll see in the works that are on view right now, see some of them have this sort of thin red line around them. And if you go back, David, maybe one or two, you'll see that, just the borders, they might remind those who are interested or who like illustrated manuscripts, like sometimes scientific manuscripts, they'll have a kind of red line, and these come from sort of medieval Iran and also even in Persian manuscripts and Arabic manuscripts, and then even the drawings are in those senses like they might have more washed out colors. So I see a lot of story and book traditions coming out through there, but he's saying that what he also brings in are just experiences from daily life. For him, these have a tremendous impact on what he brings into his work. And so he likes to bring them and build those into his work as well.
و سوالی که پرسیدید در خصوص کنفرانس آف the bird، در واقع گفتگوی پرندگان عطار، یکی از شاید دلایل این که قبول کردم این کتاب رو تصویر سازی بکنم به خاطر اون داستان و اون پروسه‌ای بود که پرنده ها طی می‌کردن که به عرفان و به خدا برسن و اون هم دقیقاً اون فراز و نشیب‌های زندگی رو نشون میداد که من باعث شدم طراحی کنم. حالا میتونیم جلوتر.
Okay, so now this actually leads us into the next question. He was saying with respect to the title Conference of the Birds, which I mentioned, this is really this story about finding the mythical bird king. There's a group of birds, they all come together and they need to find the Seymour, this mythical bird king. For those who are not familiar, this is by the medieval poet and Sufi Fariduddin Attar. And what happens is they go through all these trials and tribulations, these 7 valleys, they overcome all these trials. And when they finally, and not all of them make it, so you lose some birds along the way. And when they arrive, they realize that the Seymour is themselves, and because there are 30 birds who will remain. And this is also ultimately also about the path to finding, unity, ultimately in terms of the Sufi or the tradition, finding unity with God. But really liked, he was asked to illustrate this story, and because he also has works as an illustrator, and he was drawn to it because he felt he could connect with this journey as a human being. So that brings us to the work that the San Diego Museum of Art recently acquired, which is called Migration. You see an image of it in the gallery, the Arts of Iran gallery at the San Diego Museum of Art. However, it's not on view now. I mean, to protect it from too much light exposure, we couldn't show it for more than 6 months, and then it's resting. But we were so happy to be able to get this through Roshi, and acquired it with funds raised at our 2020 fundraiser, Mehrgan, with the Arts of Iran patrons and the Persian Cultural Center. And the size of this is really impressive, because normally a book illustration like this would be much smaller. It's something you'd hold in your hand. So he's blown it up. I want to ask you, Mohammad, if you could tell us more about this work. We know the story that inspired it, but if you could tell us more about the work, even if you talk about the heads, and then I have a couple of other questions.
فکر میکنم این کار رو در بحبوحه مهاجرت بودم، یعنی شاید حدوداً 2 سال بود که به انگلستان رسیده بودم و در استودیوی کوچیکی که داشتم در ویکفیلد کار میکردم و خیلی علاقه‌مند بودم به اینکه کارهای بزرگ در واقع روی پارچه انجام بدم، که همیشه بابت این قضیه همیشه با خانم رهنما، همیشه با روشی در این مورد خیلی صحبت میکردیم، چون خیلی برای من شروع یک کار خیلی جدید بود، همراه با نشون دادن احساسم.
Okay, so I'm going to want to get Roshi's perspective on this as well. He started working on this series when he had recently immigrated. He was a very recent immigrant to the UK. He was working in a small studio in Wakefield in the UK about a year or two after he'd immigrated from Iran. And he was really into creating these large scale works. And it was at that time, he talked to Roshi about this, and so she's sort of been part of this project from its inception. Before I move on to how, I'd like to ask Mohammad about how the journey of the birds is sort of, you've alluded to it being a metaphor for your own path as well. I'd like to hear, Roshi, if you have anything to add at this point.
With many thanks for being here and Ladan's exceptionally generous introduction. I want to go back to Mohammad and his world and how it brings us to this point of this piece here. Mohammad lives with a very particular sensitivity as an individual, which to me really shows in all of his interactions and creative processes. So when we started working together, he was focusing mainly on works on paper, and then just beginning to expand to the large-scale works on canvas, one of which is the piece that is now in the permanent collection of San Diego Museum, Migration, on view right now on the image here. And the particularity of this is not only that it's conveying the migration of the birds in the story of the Conference of the Birds, which is a stunning story in Persian, and you can, for those interested, on ADVOCARTSY's website, we have a synopsis of the telling of the story by Omid Arabian during the exhibition in our gallery, and it would be very meaningful, and this piece is on view in the setting of the gallery. The other point that I want to bring attention to is he often is using faces of Iranian or Middle Eastern women in his pieces. And I have to bring attention to what he has mentioned to me as why that is.
He's going to do that as well.
Yes, he has a very special affinity with his relationship with his mom. And I think that is one of the reasons he has an exceptional connection and respect for women of Iranian origin. And that shows not only in his art, but in the way he lives his life. And I think we need to bring attention to that, which brings a different level of meaning in how he incorporates faces of women in his body of work. Of course, this piece is also, as you mentioned, bringing about references to manuscripts by way of layouts and the traditional aspects of borders, references to text and calligraphy, and the visual of the piece.
I want to, I think this takes us nicely into the next part of this question. You know, when I looked at this piece, I was really drawn to it. And I wanted, you know, we always also want to understand, you know, what does it say? What is it about? And I know there are aspects of works that are very deliberate and very calculated and strategic. And there are other aspects that come from chance, you know, finding a text and using it. I think we sort of got to the bottom of what text was used. And I think at the time, Mohammad, you weren't even sure at the moment but we then found out, okay, this is a scientific manuscript, which I thought was wonderful because I'm working on a project that relates science to art. But one of the things that could clearly be seen was that, I mean, we know that this comes from the series about the Conference of the Birds. We understand that the journey of the birds is a metaphor for the mystical path of the Sufi toward enlightenment. And you've brought up Roshi, and I'd like to hear Mohammad continue with this. How does it touch upon your own history, you know, as an immigrant, your own personal journey, and also coming back to the faces? I know that you'd like to talk about some of the challenges you faced in the production of this series with women's faces, and if I will turn it over to you.
همینطوری که گفتم و اشاره کردم، خیلی این کار برای من، یعنی در واقع بیشتر کارهای من مربوط میشه به احساس یک فردی که مهاجر هست و بعد از مهاجرتش داره این کارها رو خلق میکنه که اونها همشون در یک دنیای دیگری هستن. یعنی به عنوان یک مهاجر صحبتی که میخوام با یک فرد خارجی یا فردی که برای اون کشور هست رو داشته باشم توی کارهام نشون میده. و در خصوص این کار همون حس پرواز و حس آزادی و حس اینکه متعلق نبودن به جای خاصی رو داشتم که این رو در واقع کشیدم و درست کردم. Sorry,
I'll translate this bit first, which is that, you know, most of Mohammad is saying most of his work has had to do with these sentiments, this experience of an immigrant, and really how to communicate that experience to those perhaps in the new context that he finds himself in, or to those who don't have this experience. And I hope that I'm saying this correctly. So he wants to share this experience with those who haven't had it. And so in this image and others like it, you know, you see the birds in flight, and, you know, he's also conveying the sense of flight of an immigrant, but also the sense of not being fixed to anything, you know, and almost being, there might be a limbo aspect of it. That's me adding on another to what he said.
در خصوص چالش هایی که داشتم، به این خاطر که من همیشه در کارهام از چهره خانم ها استفاده میکنم و اینم بک‌گراندش از کودکی من میاد و به این خاطر که من با یک معلولیتی به دنیا آمدم در دست چپم که همیشه همراه من مادرم بوده و توی پروسه واقعا خیلی در دوران نوجوانیم حتی خیلی همیشه ساپورت این دکتر و جاهای دیگه و این خیلی در ذهن من موند و توی کارهای من همیشه خانوم‌ها در واقع نقش هیرو دارن و کاراکتر اصلی خانوم‌ها هستن. تا اینجاشو بگید که ادامه‌شون بگید.
So I've, regarding my challenges, the question about, what challenges I've faced, the use of women's visages, women's faces in my work goes back to my childhood. And as Roshi also have mentioned, my mother is a huge part of my background, or his background. And she always accompanied him everywhere, especially because of the fact that he had also challenges because of the fact that one of his arms wasn't developed like the others. So as she accompanied him to doctors, she was with him a lot. And so for him, women have a major role in his life, and he views them really as heroes.
و برای سفارش این کتابی که در واقع کنفرانس آف د برد که داشتم کار میکردم، با توجه به اینکه سفارش دهنده از ایران بودن، از من خواستن که چهره خانم ها رو حذف کنم و برای من قاعدتا این غیر ممکن بود. یا باید فقط یک پرنده کار میکردم با فرم اصلی، یا اینکه کلا کار رو قبول نمیکردم. و در نهایت تصمیم بر این شدش که چهره خانم ها رو کار بکنم و داشته باشم، ولی با توجه به هر کاراکتر و هر بخش یک ماسک روی صورت اینها بذارم. و همین فکر میکنم یک چالش خیلی خوبی بود که البته تو کارهام هم ادامه داره، چون معتقدم در دنیای واقعی هم آدم‌ها وقتی بیرون میان از اون فضای خودشون یک ماسک روی صورت دارن. پس در نهایت تصمیم گرفتم که این کتاب رو به این شکل کار بکنم.
So as we had talked about before, this project, the Conference of the Birds series, to which migration belongs, it originated with the commission to illustrate a book, and the source that commissioned it was in Iran. And so as you see, he has all these images of women's, it uses women's heads. He was asked to, in Iran, where there are restrictions on I won't go into that, but the restrictions that basically, I think, came down to the source saying, please remove the heads of women. And that was not a possibility for Mohammad. So instead, he came up with this solution of adding a mask to them, to their faces. So the women are there, but they all have masks if you see them more closely, maybe even behind Roshi. And thank you, David. They're not, you don't see the full face. And the eyes, I think, are covered here with a mask. But then he also felt that in the end, this has now translated into other works that he does, into future projects as well, because he feels that, when we walk out the door, in some ways, we all are wearing a kind of mask when we walk into the real world. And so now it's become something that is integrated into his body of work.
و این کارم به این شکل صورت گرفت و به همین نسبتم رفتش جلو. اگر در مورد این سوالتون رو
No, that's very good. خیلی خوبه. Roshi, before we go to the next question, do you have anything to add here, or?
There are some more images that show the use of the masks as he was requested to alter. If we can go to them before, yeah. If you could go back one, no, back one. Oh, like this is a very iconic image from the body of work of the Conference of the Birds. By the way, this book was published in Iran. It's kind of difficult for us to get access to it in the US, but it has also been translated in German. So an English German version, a Persian German version of it is available on Amazon for people who would like to order it. The graphics are stunning. And of course, some of the works are available for viewing at our gallery. But as you will know, this image was, after the fact, altered to accommodate the restrictions imposed for the Iranian publishing company.
Thank you. Also, Mohammad, I have a feeling that people will wonder about this. How do you choose the heads? Where do they come from? Are they known?
خیلی من همیشه توی کارهام، البته کارهام، چهرهایی که انتخاب میکنم مربوط میشه به آدمهایی که باهاشون صحبت میکنم گاهی اوقات. میتونه یک دوستم باشه، میتونه مادرم باشه و هر کس دیگری. و شنیدن داستانهای اینا خیلی برای من جالبه. داستانهای مربوط به زندگیشون. یک خانوم وقتی حالا فراز و نشیب‌هایی که داشته، مثل یکی از دوستانم که چهرش توی اینجا هست، مثلا فرزند اوتیسم داشته و خیلی چالش، و این برای من خیلی جالب بوده توی این پرنده‌ای که از این مثلا تو پرنده مثلا روم استفاده کنم، یا حتی صورت فوزیه یا ثریا که هر کدوم از اینا به عنوان کسی که یک زمانی در ایران بودن و بعد مهاجرت کردن به کشورهای دیگه و چالش داشتن، برای من خیلی استوری اون آدما خیلی مهم بوده. در نهایت همیشه صورت خانم‌هایی رو استفاده می‌کنم که زندگیشون داستان داشته باشه. یعنی اینطوری نیست که حالا از یک چهره خوشم بیاد صرفاً و بگم چون این صورت زیبایی داره استفاده کنم. نه خیر، همیشه پشت سر همون آدم‌ها هم داستان خودشون رو دارن به قول من.
Okay. Yes, I meant. He was saying in regarding the heads and the faces that he uses, so we know they're all women. These can be friends, they can be his mother, or anyone else that has an impact on him. You know, the conversations that he has, or they can be iconic images like like Soraya, the second wife of the Shah of Iran. Who married him, I think it was in the mid-20th century, in 1950s. And in one of them, if you go back, David, a few go back to, I'll tell you, yeah, here, go back. I think the next one. There was one, go forward. And again, and again. Okay, here I think you mentioned, Mohammad, this was a friend. This is a friend who had talked to you about their child and the challenges that they were facing with having a child on the spectrum. And so he's moved by these stories, and and this is another way of bringing them out in his work. So I think shall we go to the next question? Mohammad, okay. I think this one will be very interesting for everyone because it will relate to maybe to something in the future here at SDMA. Could you tell us about your artistic process? And you can through these images, tell us about your process of how you begin with an idea or a concept and then see it through to fruition, to a complete piece or series. دارم از محمد خواهش میکنم که توضیح بدن.
من توی پروسه کاری به دو بخش تقسیم میشه. یک بخش کارهایی هستش که روی پارچه انجام میدم یا به قول معروف روی دیوار، و یک پروسه دیگه که انجام میدم مثل همین کاری که الان دارن میبینن روی کاغذ، و معمولاً با قلم ایرانی مینویسم کارهام رو و بعد کلاژ میکنم و بعد از اون دوباره پرینت میگیرم با دستگاه فتوکپی و بعد باز هم پرینت میزنم. یک پروسه‌ای داره که البته که خیلی به تکنیکش هست، و در خصوص خیلی دوست دارم در مورد تکنیکی که قراره در واقع به زودی انجام بدم و همین تکنیک در واقع کارش پشت سر خانم روشی هستش که موزه هم دارن. خیلی این کار رو دوست دارم به واسطه اینکه وقتی کار رو به دیوار یا به پارچه میچسبونم خیلی لمس کردن توی این کار برای من جالبه و پاک کردن کاغذ از روی دیوار یا از روی به قول معروف کانوس پارچه.
Okay, I will try my best to translate what was just shared. If we go back to the first image of this series for this question, David, So I think, as I mentioned, and you see in that picture, Mohammad works with his hand and 2 feet. And if you go back one, even one before that, so he works in his process. It involves, 2 phases. He works both on canvas. There's an element that goes on the wall, and it's more large scale. And there's another aspect to that on paper. Sometimes the final product is paper, and sometimes the final product's on canvas. But in this case, like you'll see here, is this paper or canvas, Mohammed? Because I don't know this work.
Canvas.
This one
is
yeah.
paper.
This is paper. Then go to the next image, please, David. This one is paper as well, or?
آره اینا همشون کاغذه. رنگش
So
مشخصه.
some of these are also small scale. But how does he start? If we go to the next picture, so he uses this reverse print transfer process, but it involves that, he starts usually himself with coming up with the idea. He uses, I think, is it a calligraphic pen? You said an Iranian, pen. And he does some of this, he draws some of it out, then he prints them, then he photocopies them, then he reworks, works on them again. You see, I'm adding here, there's a lot of cutting involved. And then if you go to the next image, here he's using the paper cutter to size these. And then there's an element here where he then transfers prints onto the wall. And this aspect, I think he says he really loves this process. I'm imagining there must be something almost, there's a methodical, there's a methodical aspect to this part of the process. Pasting it, putting the papers on the wall or on this final surface. And then he has to take each of these down. And imagine that, again, here he is, this for him is a part of the process that he really enjoys.
از من سوال پرسیدن، خوبه الان دیدم پایین که پرسیدن این نوشته هایی که در واقع بالای کارهام بعضی اوقات هست چه معنی داره. این بعضی از این نوشته ها رو من از کتاب های قدیمی ایرانی یا کتاب های قدیمی عربی برمی‌دارم و معنی خاصی برای من نداره، چون قاعدتا وقتی چاپ میزنم برعکس میشه و معنی خودش رو از دست میده. فقط صرفا به عنوان یک تایپ توی کارم استفاده میشه.
Okay, he's took a peek at some of the questions, and I think there was one about what are the texts on this that you find or that appear at the top of some of his works, and I think that basically he doesn't necessarily, sometimes he takes these from old printed books and he doesn't necessarily know all the sources. Sometimes they're Arabic printed books, sometimes Persian ones. I mean, the story, obviously, he was familiar with the Attar's Conference of the Birds. And then half of that image is the same text backwards. So this one, we found the source for it being a scientific text, a medieval scientific text, and I'll just find it later and I can put that into the caption. I think it's also.
و یکی از چیزهایی که توی تکنیک کارم در واقع خیلی برای من دوست داشتنیه و فکر میکنم خیلی مختص خودم کرده اینه که همیشه هم گفتم پای چپم دست چپم هست و به عنوان دستم ازش استفاده میکنم و توی کارهام یک زاویه خاصی داره موقع بریدن و این خیلی برای من در واقع بعضی اوقات چالنجه، چون بعضی اوقات از دست میدم و یه قسمت رو خیلی میبرم و باعث میشه خیلی کاراکترام تیز باشه یا برش‌های خیلی خاصی داشته باشه.
Okay, so as going back to his process, he's saying that, because of the fact that he can't use his left hand, to cut, his left foot essentially acts. Here you see how he uses his left foot as his left hand. But the result is that because sometimes this might end up in cutting something where he didn't want to cut it or it cuts. So it might give his work a slight, a slight alteration. But in the end, actually, this becomes a part of the final piece. But this is, it's both a challenge. I see it actually as also lending it its own signature.
I would like
من
Oh, and Roshi, go ahead.
yes, going back to how he and Mohammad went from paper to canvas.
Mhm.
I remember very clearly that he had concerns about what he thought were imperfections coming into his work because of the nature of how he has to cut and how he has to convey with the limitations that he has. Mind you, I never see him limited in any way. But he was concerned because of some deviations in the work, some imperfections that he would view in the sense of lines not perfectly lining up, or things being a little bit off. And I remember having this discussion so we could remove this once and for all for him, where that is exactly the beauty of his creative process, because it's so organic, it is so natural, and it becomes an absolute signature of his creative process.
Clearly, it does. No, thank you for expanding on that, Roshi.
خیلی جالبه که ایشون بهش اشاره کردن، چون می‌خواستم دقیقاً همین رو بگم، چون برای من اوایل کار کردن در این حجم خب قاعدتاً کنترل کاغذ وقتی چسب می‌خوره یا وقتی ماده‌ای بهش می‌خوره خیلی سخت میشه و در نهایت اینطوری بودش که ایشون به من کمک می‌کرد، روشی، که من این رو بتونم حذف کنم، چون خیلی زوایای کارام خیلی کج میشد، یا حتی باور کنید بعضی وقتها زنگ میزدم و گریه میکردم، میگفتم من احساس میکنم که آدما کار منو دوست ندارن به خاطر اینکه کار من نرمال نیست و کجه. ولی الان خیلی خوشحالم بابتش، به خاطر اینکه کارهام مختص خودم هست و به این نتیجه رسیدم تو این سالها که این یک بخش شخصی هست و مربوط به خودمه و باید دوستش داشته باشم.
Okay, this is, I'm happy that this came up because now you'll see sort of in action what this relationship can be about. Mohammad was saying, you know, I was actually just thinking I wanted to talk about this. In the earlier on, it was mentioned about how when he first immigrated, he was working on paper, but he then started moving into larger scale. But of course, the challenge you saw right there just with paper, this becomes an even bigger challenge when you're working on a larger scale. And so right today, I'm introducing, you know, very nonchalantly as, oh yes, you know, but this, some of the imperfections that come or the adjustments that come from using your foot, and they're part of his work and it's part of his signature. Well, it didn't just happen that way. This was a real path and another journey that he had to take. And he mentioned being in tears on the phone with Roshi, saying that he felt that people wouldn't like his work, that he really viewed it as an imperfection. Roshi really encouraged him to embrace it. So something that he started off thinking was a setback or an imperfection, and for anyone here who you know, suffers from perfectionism or has their own challenges. I mean, here is a prime example of how you take that and you turn it into your strength. And so now it's really become that. And that's, you know, again, this develops out of also a very positive working relationship, to be encouraged to push forward and to know that someone believes in your work and sees its value before sometimes you do. I think if you are both okay, I'll go to the next question. Okay.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Yes. So I think this also leads nicely into a more sort of philosophical question. You know, we've learned about the topics, the subjects of Mohammad's work. We've heard him talk about the process, the artistic process. So I think bringing it back to just how yourself in your own life, you know, and where you see yourself in this art world and globally, where do you see your journey going now? And so one part of this question is about where you see your journey going. And another part, which may be part of this, is how has this collaboration with a platform like ADVOCARTSY with Roshi, and even with museums, what part has these relationships played in your journey? And then I'd like to ask Roshi to respond to the same.
ببینید برای من همیشه معتقدم که یعنی در واقع کسی از من میپرسه عمر آرت چقدره، من میگم 7 سال. به این خاطر که من در 7 سال اخیر که مهاجرت کردم خیلی پروسه ها رو گذروندم دیگه، چه به واسطه اینکه چون معتقدم هر وقت فردی مهاجرت میکنه حتی از شهری به شهر دیگری خیلی میتونه روی کارش تاثیر بذاره، به واسطه دیدن، به واسطه برخورد و حتی آموزشی که در دانشگاه. و این هم برای منم در واقع شامل منم میشد. من فکر میکنم خوبه که در این خصوص بگم من فکر کنم 1.5 سال یا 2 سال بود به انگلستان رسیدم که با ادوکارسی آشنا شدم، در واقع با خانم روشی، و اونم به واسطه اینکه هر دوی ما در بخش‌های مختلفی هنر ایرانی رو دنبال می‌کرد. من به عنوان یک آرتیست و ایشون به عنوان فردی که با آرتیست‌های ایرانی کار می‌کرد و از همونجا شروع شد. یعنی من همیشه معتقدم به عنوان یک آرتیست که در انگلستان دارم کار می‌کنم، با تیت مدرن کار کردم، با بریتیش میوزیم و جاهای مختلف دیگری، حتی تو دانشگاه رویال درینگ اسکول تحصیل کردم. معتقدم که یک آرتیست حتما باید یک رابطه‌ای با اون گالری که باهاش کار میکنه از نظر احساسی و از نظر کانکشنی که میتونن با هم دیگه گفتگویی که داشته باشن رو حفظ بکنن، چون اگر غیر از این باشه یک آرت خلق نمیشه. و ما همیشه این بحثی بودش که ما همیشه با روشی جون داریم در این خصوص که ما آرت خلق بکنیم و صرفاً به این خاطر کاری نمی‌کنن که آدم‌ها خوششون بیاد، چون آرت من مربوط به خودمه یا مربوط به احساسم هستش. و اینم فکر می‌کنم بعد از همین 2 سال بود که ما یک نمایشگاهی داشتیم که در ادوکارسی بود که کارم در واقع رفت به سندیگ میوزیم که خیلی برای من راستش رو بخوایم هیجان انگیز بود، چون قبل از این داخل انگلستان این اتفاق می‌افتاد یا در آرت دبی می‌افتاد یا بریتیش میوزیم و این اتفاق برای من یک جرقه خیلی بزرگی بود به این واسطه که محدود نشد به انگلستان یا همین جایی که زندگی می‌کنم و امریکا هم تونست برسه و برای من خیلی این قضیه برای من خیلی خوشاینده در واقع دیگه که میتونم کارم رو به افراد بیشتری در دنیای دیگری نشون بدم و این خاصیت فکر میکنم آرت که میتونه به جاهای مختلف سفر بکنه. ببخشید خیلی طولانی گفتم، امیدوارم که
So I will I took jotted some notes as he was speaking so I wouldn't interrupt his flow. Mohammad is telling us, that when he's asked, what is the lifetime of his art? He says about 7 years. Is that correct, Mohammad? And the reason for this is because it's been about 7 years now, since he immigrated to the UK, or almost that long that he's known Roshi. He went through many processes during that time, many phases, if you think about the journey of the birds to find the Seymour, the mythical king, that he, even going from city to city, even studying at a different university in the UK, that he should, and through this journey, during this journey, about a year and a half to 2 years in, he and Roshi came across each other because, they were both following contemporary Iranian art and art in general. He, from the point of view, he as an artist, she as an advocate. And I think when they came together, they really, they had a shared vision. And Roshi will speak to this next, but that, he says, he's worked with many institutions in the UK, the Tate Modern, the British Museum. He's shown his works at the Royal College of Drawing or Art in the UK.
Royal Drawing School.
Drawing, yes, which is where he graduated from recently. And he feels that with any I think he feels, and Roshi, he feels that Roshi shares this, that with any of these relationships, with any of the places that he's shown, that having that connection is also important, and feeling that he can communicate his experience, his work, what he's doing with his art to these places, and that his art is about his own experience. And I think after about a year working with Roshi, he had his own show, a solo show at ADVOCARTSY in Los Angeles. And this was the first time where he sort of broke out of the United Kingdom. Although I should mention, I think he also has works, is either collected in collections in Romania as well. Like, I know it's not just UK and US.
No, in Italy, in Romania. Yeah.
Italy, okay.
Yeah.
we only know a few, and I'm sure there's more than that. But to break into also the American art scene, and then the acquisition that we have, which is quite a large scale work, he was very happy about that, because it also meant he now has pushed beyond the UK into the American art scene as well. And so I think maybe this is a good time to turn the same question over to you, Roshi. Where do you see yourself in this journey?
Well, I started in 2015 with a mission of addressing a void, of bringing attention to artists of Iranian origin as a mission-driven platform and gallery, because in Los Angeles, we live in the largest, in the city with the largest community of Iranians living outside Iran. And I thought, based on my background as an attorney, that and my activities in the community, I could be making some effort towards presenting exceptional artists' work and connecting them to museums, institutions, and the collector base. Now, it is very important to realize that none of this work happens in vacuum. It starts with a connection between a conversation between me and, for example, in our case with Mohammad, in a very genuine connection devoted to the success of the art. And when I say that is because we both talk about this often. Sometimes we feel like there's a third person in the room when we talk. It's me, Mohammad, and the art. And when we talk, it's almost like we are talking about the art as an entity or a live individual in person. And we try to be the custodian of that. And my role then becomes, how do I become the best custodian of that within all my means, to the extent that I have now a gallery and a platform and a voice. I showcase the art. I try to communicate that art to the trusted curators, and that relationship builds one at a time. I remember that in the middle of the pandemic, November 2020, when the book in Iran got published, and I received the packet of the actual works on paper, Mohammad and I had a call, and we said, we have to show this because it's timely. So we had a solo exhibition in 2020 of his works, and we were so limited in getting people in because it was by appointment only. We had a film made so it could be seen by more people. I then, if you recall, Ladan, the first time you got exposed to this was when we had a presentation at Craft Contemporary by invitation of Susan Iskin, who's the director of Craft Contemporary. You came in and you brought context as I was presenting a tour in the exhibition. And then that led us to a connection and the acquisition of the piece at the museum. Everything is intended with a focus of being a true advocate and custodian of the art. Both me and Mohammad serve that. It's almost like we are serving the art in the best ways we can. Sometimes we have conversations about how we need to make that custodianship be pure and not be affected by things from the outside. Things happen. And we often have those conversations. And there are beautiful moments like when we have the exhibition in the middle of pandemic, in the gallery with fewer, like probably a tenth or like a very small portion of people coming through had it been a regular season. LACMA came through with the vision of Linda Komarov. 2 works on paper were acquired for the LACMA's permanent collection. You found us through the programming and our connection through how we met through Farhang Foundation. You then we worked together very intimately to help place that piece in the museum's collection because of your vision, and you acquired that piece as the first piece of Iranian contemporary art for the museum's collection. A lot of firsts are happening through these beautiful connections that are dedicated to the preservation of that art that we are all custodians of.
Thank you. And yes, that was a wonderful presentation that you gave with Omid as well. I remember on that, and to see Mohammad's show, and I was very moved by it. I should actually mention, I'm sure that if we didn't mention this already, we're very grateful to the Farhang Foundation, which really is this platform that promotes and supports Iranian culture, Persian language and culture. That's how I met you through the Arts Council, and I'm really grateful for that connection. And that's yet another angle of how we support the arts. We also have how all this led to us acquiring this work. And I think we also see our role as custodians of the work, but also as a way to share Iranian contemporary art, not just in the context of a gallery dedicated to Iran, which we're so lucky to have at SDMA, but also in the context of contemporary art, and sometimes we have an Iranian American artist, sometimes we have contemporary artists. So what's wonderful about Mohammad's work is that it has relationships with other works in our collection. And I think the more we learn about it, the more there's more we can do with it. And our docents who sponsor this lecture series and our staff have all really loved your work, Mohammad. I want to I know it's already past 11 a.m. We had one final question, which shouldn't take too long. This is almost our teaser to end with before we open it up to some questions from the audience. What's next? We've now had such a wonderful look into your work, your process. What are your upcoming projects, Mohammad, and exhibitions, programs that you have?
غالباً نمایشگاه بعدی که خارج از انگلستان دارم نمایشگاهی هستش که در واقع لایو اینستالیشن، همون اجرای زنده در سن دیگو میوزیم هست. ولیکن نمایشگاهی دارم در دانشگاه یورک توی ماه اکتبر. نمایشگاه دیگری دارم که تصویرش هم دارید می‌بینید، دو تا از تصویرهای کارهایی که هست که قراره اونجا باشه.
در یورک هستن اینا.
بله، برای برای نمایشگاه کانتمپرری آرتیستایی که چاپ کار میکنن و بسیار نمایشگاه بزرگیه، چون هر سال یک بار برگزار میشه در انگلستان، که از من خواستن و دعوت کردن که در اونجا کار داشته باشم. و 2 تا نمایشگاه انفرادی دیگر. به طور کل خیلی فکر میکنم تا پایان این سال و در سال آینده خیلی شلوغ هستم و دارم تمام تلاشم رو میکنم. و در خصوص اینکه صحبت قبلیتون اجازه بدید که اینو بگم و تمامش کنیم، اینکه من همیشه تمام ترجیحم و تمام تلاشم این هست صرفا من رو به عنوان یک ایرانی بشناسن، ولیکن در قالب آرت ایرانی همیشه قرار نگیره. همیشه دوست دارم که در همینطوری که 4 تا از کارهام مثلا رفتش توی گاورمنت انگلستان و تو آرت کالج، در واقع گاورمنت انگلستان کارهای منو کالکت کردش، خیلی دوست دارم که من رو به عنوان یک هنرمند اینترنشنال بشناسن و تمام سعیم رو دارم میکنم که این روند بره جلو. کار کردن با آرت کانسیل انگلستان هستش و پروژه هایی که فقط شاید مختص بچه های انگلستان باشه و اونها رو قبول میکنم به این خاطر که میخوام فقط صرفا آدم ها یک آرت و یک فرم مشخص رو نبینن، ببینن که آرتیست های دیگه هم هستن با فرمت خودشون و شکل خودشون از ملیت های خودشون و اونها هم در جامعه هنری هستن. فقط پیکاسو به عنوان یک آرتیست یا داوینچی یا هر کسی دیگری که آدم های بزرگی هستن در تاریخ هنر جا ندارن. هنرمندهای دیگری هستن از ملیت های دیگری که میتونن در تاریخ هنر قرار بگیرن و حضور داشته باشن. همین.
خیلی ممنون. I wanted to, he says, so in terms of upcoming exhibitions, he has actually a very large scale group exhibition that he's contributing I think the works that you see to, which is a diptych that will be at the University of York coming up, I think in the next month or two. And this is an annual exhibition, and it's widely known, and so it's really wonderful that his work is being represented there. It's but on contemporary artists who work with print. But he also has a couple of other exhibitions coming up. He's very busy, toward the end of this year, beginning of next. But the one that we're really excited about is a live art event that he will be doing for us at SDMA in front of the right next to our Panama 66 cafe in the colonnade outside of the museum. He will be doing a live installation of, showing his process, the phase where he's actually pasting prints onto the surface. So that will be October 4th through 6th at SDMA, and he will be in person during that time, and it's free to the public. Please come and see that. And we'd like to also share that we are supported in these events in cultural partnership with Farhang as well. And I also, this will be just before the annual Mehragan Fete, the fundraiser for the Arts of Iran collection at the San Diego Museum of Art, which is organized each year by San Diego with our partners, our cultural partners in San Diego, the Persian Cultural Center. And so please, that will be on the 7th. And we hope that those of you who are in town can come and join us on that evening. I want to end with a final thought by Mohammad, which was that when we coming out of the last question, where I think I mentioned also that his work it can be displayed not just in the Arts of Iran gallery, but in other parts of the museum. He really wants people. He embraces himself as an artist of Iranian origin, but really important to him is to be seen as an international artist. I think you've already achieved that, if you ask me, Mohammad, but you see this already in the fact that he's being collected by government collections in the UK. Yeah. This is great recognition as somebody who worked, at the British Museum before and with the Arts Council as well. I think it's fantastic that you're being recognized at that level. And now, in the States as well. And I think this is only the beginning, but he feels that, it's really important for artists to be seen for their work and for every artist's individual contribution to the history of art. And so I will end there. If there's anything you'd like to add, Roshi, before we turn it over to Q&A, I will hand it over to you and then open it up.
I just want to thank you for being an incredible visionary, and thank you for making this program possible, and for all your support and your kindness and generosity to all the artists and all the other people who say the kindest things about you, Ladan. Thank you
You're
so
very
much.
kind. And right back at both of you, really. Okay, so now I'm a little bit embarrassed. I'm going to turn over the Q&A to everyone and see what you're going to ask.
Yeah, yes. We have quite a few really fine questions here. And what I'd like to do is just run through the chat very quickly. And then I have a few more questions of my own. But quickly, do you have a favorite paper to work on? Was one question.
Mohammad, would you like me to translate?
من فکر میکنم سرنوشت آدم ها برای من تعیین میکنه که چه کسی رو بیشتر از همه دوست داشته باشم توی در واقع بخش کاری. البته من میگم هر کاری رو که تولید میکنم عاشق اون کارم و عاشق اون کاراکترها هستم، یعنی نمیتونم بگم چه کسی فیوریت منه، ولی که فکر میکنم
سوال اینه که چه جور کاغذی دوست داری؟
نه معذرت میخوام، من چون یه سوال دیگه شونو گفتن فیوریت چه سوری، من چون سوال دیگر رو داشتم جواب دادم. anyway. در خصوص کاغذی که خودم میسازم رو دوست دارم، چون عادتمه که هر چیزی که در واقع توی کارهام استفاده میشه رو خودم درست میکنم و کاغذ منم همینطوره. کاغذ ساده رو میخرم و رنگ میکنم و در نهایت کاغذی که رنگش رو دوست دارم رو خودم تهیه میکنم و همیشه هم ترجیحم اینه که وقتی کسی کارم رو نگاه میکنه به گذشته فکر بکنه، فکر نکنه یک آرتیستیه که جدیدن این کارو کرده و فکر میکنم رنگ اون کاغذم القا کننده این هستش.
Roshi, I might ask you to take this part of this because I got distracted. I was trying to catch up with some of the questions, which I said I wouldn't do. But if you get this, I'll get the next.
He creates his own paper, and by that, I'm going to ask him a follow-up question. محمد جون، وقتی که میگی که خودت کاغذی که درست میکنی، میشه پروسش رو یه ذره شرح بدی؟
کاغذ ساده رو میخرم و با رنگی که میسازم، در واقع رنگی که خودم ترکیبش رو دارم و در واقع رنگ میکنم و یک پروسه‌ای داره تا خشک بشه، مثلا یه 3-4 روز میمونه و بعد هم در واقع این رنگی هستش که کاغذم میبینید.
چه جور کاغذی؟ یعنی
گفتم کاغذ ساده یعنی کاغذ ساده سفید دیگه و رولی بلند هستش.
He uses normal white paper. It's not any kind of specific form. And then he basically creates some kind of concoction where he lets it sit and kind of take on that beautiful antique looking color, and he allows it to dry before he takes on the actual design and printing on that.
Thank you. That's great. Let's see. Let's come back to the questions here. So one of our own docent trainees actually is asking about, and I think you've addressed this to some extent, but when we look at these works, the birds seem to be going in all types of directions, and I guess this is related to the story of the
Conference of the Birds.
Conference of the Birds is being. How else do we interpret that?
فهمیدین محمد جان؟
بعد صداشون یه ذره هم بد شنیدم.
میگن که این یه سوالی هست که در واقع مثل که قبلا I think he's answered this but we can come back to it. یه کسی میخوان راجع به این پرنده ها که به نظر میاد در حال پرواز به جهات مختلف میرن، میخواستن بدونن که این میتونم همون توضیحی که قبلا دادین رو.
آره، اون مربوط میشه به در واقع همون قسمتی که گفتم که من اون بخش مهاجرت، پرواز کردن و آزادیش رو در نظر داشتم.
The freedom that comes as an immigrant, the flight. He also mentioned before the lack of a solid ground as well. So I thought there's a balance there.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one question that is in, I don't know if it's
in Persian.
or-
شما می‌بینین
Persian.
محمد
بله دارم میخونمش.
So
He's reading
I actually checked in with Dr. Google, and Google translates that as you're as busy as someone who creates style with a specific technique and a specific color palette. Do you have days when a completely different style comes to you with colors outside of this circle? In this case, how do you stay focused in your current style? And what's your suggestion and best practice to stay focused? So I would say, sort of summarize two questions. Do you have sometimes thoughts of doing something completely different? Just we see the style, it's beautiful, something completely different. And if that's the case, how do you stay focused?
خیلی باید اینجا من واقعی فکر میکنم واقعی ترین سوالیه که میشه بهش جواب داد اینه که هر هنرمندی و هر آرتیستی در هر صورت نیاز داره برای ادامه زندگی. پس در نهایت بعضی وقتها بهش سفارش داده میشه یا بعضی وقتها یک پروژه‌ای بهش میرسه که کار بکنه که هیچ ربطی به فضای کاریش نداره و در نهایت به نظر من تا جایی که میتونه و این بستگی به خلاقیت اون آرتیست داره که چقدر میتونه به فضای خودش نزدیک بکنه. به طور مثال من در هفته آینده یک پروژه‌ای دارم که در یک هاستل هست، هاستل پناهجوها و هیچ گونه ربطی هم به فضای آرت نداره، ولی از من خواستن دیزاین و رنگ‌هایی که اونجا کار میشه رو انتخاب بکنم و من این رو با توجه به رنگ‌هایی که دوست دارم مثل زرد، مثل سبز میخوام تو فضای اونجا استفاده بکنم و این در نهایت برمیگرده به خلاقیت اون آرتیست که بتونه اون بخش رو با فضای ذهنی خودش مچ بکنه یا نه و من یاد گرفتم که این کار رو بتونم به خوبی حداقل انجام بدم. مثل پروژه‌ای که توی شهر لستر داشتم به اسم پلی این وندرلند، یک فضای کاملا رنگین و رنگ‌های شاد و یک چالنجی بود برای خودم، ولی در نهایت با این چالش کنار اومدم و فکر می‌کنم که این خیلی ربط داره به فضای ذهنی آرتیست.
Okay, so his response is that sometimes, you know, every artist needs also to take on projects that really have to do with just supporting themselves, you know, supporting their own lives, and that not always do these align with seemingly align with their work, you know, or where their work is. So how does he approach this, you know, to be able to do it? And maybe this comes back to the focus, you know, how do you kind of stay focused? Well, his strategy has been to make it relevant, make the work that he's doing, even if it seems like it has nothing to do with what is in his wider repertoire and his trajectory, to make it relevant. So, for example, he was asked to design a hostel. I think it's a hostel for refugees. And he was asked to choose, you know, to help design it, to choose the colors. This has nothing to do with what he does really, but he's going to be using the colors that he's also currently interested in. He's going to bring aspects of what he's doing to there. And then in another example he gave, where I think it goes the other way perhaps, is he had a project in Leicester in the UK called Wonderland, and he had to work in this very colorful space, maybe sort of at the other extreme of what he's done. And this was a challenge, but he found a way to work with that. And it's possible, I'm wondering, you know, maybe some of that color then came in and formed some of his work. So the idea is, when it doesn't fit, to find relevance in these other seemingly, you know, disconnected projects, to find them a way to be part of his whole and the wider, bigger journey.
Cool.
درست گفتم محمد؟
بله. و خب باز هم میگم خوبه که اینو آخرش اضافه کنیم. من باز فکر میکنم که یک آرتیست نقش بزرگی داره در خلق اون فضایی که بهش در واقع سفارش میدن و کار میکنن و اون چالنجی که اون آرتیست داره که بتونه اون مخاطب یا اون سفارش دهنده رو بتونه قانع بکنه.
Okay, so I might miss out some words here, but I think he, again, like he feels that, just to add to what he said before, that every artist has kind of a bigger objective, a bigger destiny even, and that he's one of the things he needs to do is to always find ways to make these various elements work together. Sometimes, it's a way of convincing them, and these various elements.
Great.
I hope okay, go ahead.
Ray asked the question, to go back to what Ladan was telling us, that you're an athlete as well. And how was your limited ability impacted yourself as an athlete? In what ways does that impact your life as an athlete?
من فکر میکنم که دویدن خود زندگیه و برای من که یک آرتیست هستم فکر میکنم و همیشه به همین آدم هایی که میشناسم و از من جوانتر همیشه بهشون میگم که ورزش رو در زندگیتون داشته باشید، چون بهتون کمک میکنه که بهتر خلق بکنید و بهتر فکر بکنید و در نهایت اینطوریه که استرس هم نسبت به زندگی واقعی خیلی کمتر میشه، چون ورزش کردن، اونم در سطح قهرمانی یا سطح جهانی که من دویدم برای پارالمپیک، فکر میکنم که استرسش در مقابل شاید خیلی از مسائلی که توی آرت به وجود میاد یا توی زمینه زندگی به وجود میادش چیزی نیست. و ورزش من همیشه میگم مخصوصا دویدن خود زندگیه، چون میدوید و اول خط هستید و قهرمان میشید و ممکنه یک روز دیگر همسترینگتون پاره بشه عضله پشت رانتون و دیگه نتونید قهرمان باشید. در نهایت دویدن مثل زندگیه و من هر دوتاشو دوست دارم و هر روز که هنوزه هر دوتا رو حفظ میکنم، نه در حد قهرمانی ولی در حد اینکه بهم کمک کنه. و روشی جون جزو کسایی هست که همیشه بهم میگه خب محمد جون ورزشت رو نگه دار و منم همیشه سعی میکنم اینو تو زندگیم داشته باشم واقعا.
So he's saying that he thinks running, really running is life. Running is life. And for him as an artist, he always says this to younger people. I'm sure he says it to more than younger people as well, that always to keep exercise in your life. It helps you think more clearly. It brings, it helps you, improves your health. It improves your life, and it helps you handle the stresses of life as well. And so for him, he's especially, and of all the exercises, especially running has a particular relevance to him and is particularly important because when you run, there's also different stages. There's the start of it, there's the finish line. There's also maybe somewhere in the middle, or you might injure yourself. But I have to agree as somebody who's experienced a couple of marathons and is not a fast runner, that I actually take that mentality and apply it to my life, because you have to also, in distance running, know that there's a long game. So if you do have these moments and these hurdles, this mentality that comes from exercise and running, I think I agree with you, Mohammad, that it gives you the tools, it gives you ways to cope with your life and to improve it and to handle the stress. And he says that, Roshi always tells him, you're keeping your exercise, right? You're keeping that in, and he is.
Great, thank you. I wonder about some of the creatures that we see, and I'm gonna zip back to. Yeah. For example, the figure, the sort of chimera of human head, animal body. Do those come from stories? And forgive me if you've actually explained this, but or are we left to just imagine what that might be about?
ببینید برای من اینا خب همینجوری نبود که یه شکل بگیره. این بس به در واقع دورانی هستش که در زمانی که مدرسه میرفتم یا دانشجو بودم در بخش هنر، کتاب‌های هخامنشی و اون اسفنکس ها خیلی به من در واقع ایده میداد. اینکه مجسمه هایی که روبروی همدیگه هستن تو هخامنشی دارن با همدیگه گفتگو میکنن، یا حتی در فرش های ایرانی که به صورت قرینه روبروی همدیگه هستن. و به مرور زمان و خب علاقه شدید خودم به حیوانات و مخصوصا سگ‌ها برای من همیشه توی کاراکترهایی که میسازم این هست که صحبت میکنن با هم دیگه و همیشه راستش رو بخواین شاید خیلی خنده‌دار باشه نمیدونم، ولی واقعیتش اینجاست که من همیشه فکر میکنم که خیلی ارتباط خوب میتونم سگ‌ها رو بفهمم و سگ‌ها هم میتونن خیلی خوب منو بفهمم و باشون حرف بزنم و خیلی از کارهای منم از همین گرفته میشه. حالا میتونه اون موجود سر یک انسان داشته باشه، موضوع به نظر من اون فهمیدن و اون احساسی هستش که در تمام موجودات هستش.
So he's saying that, you know, there's actually, for him, you know, these creatures don't come out of nowhere. You know, some of them have roots in, you know, Achaemenid history, ancient, you know, Iran, or, you know, he might have a sphinx. I mean, we might see, I think maybe, you know, harpies. There's other creatures that come out of also, you know, a history of visual culture in the Iranian world and in the wider Middle East. And I'm just adding that. Or like from carpets, you know, and having sort of two carpets sort of together. And then he has always had this real interest and real affinity for dogs, which, you know, he features a lot as well. And he's always felt that he has this, he can really connect with them. And so all of these works, though, in the end, they have roles and they speak to each other, and they live in this kind of harmonious universe that he creates when he's creating his works. And
right. Well, we're running long on time, so I will hold off on any more questions. But just to say, I think your works are so wonderful. At once, the printmaking process and the process of creating it is spectacular, but the imperfections actually are really incredibly beautiful and expressive. Even in figures like this, you feel a sense of emotion in each of those figures based on posing and what they're wearing, their hats, their helmets. It's great. Thank you. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mary.
Oops. Well, thank you so much. I know everyone loves this artwork in our collection, and hearing how they're made and what goes into it and the team that puts it together is just, you know, just heartwarming, really. And we can't wait to see for the exhibition. And I'm sure everybody is so happy that we launched our 2023-2024 season with your artwork and with you as our guest, Mohammad Barrangi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Roshi.
thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Mohammad. Thank you, Roshi. Thank you,
pleasure.
Mary
Thank
and
you.
David and Bea and Doug.
Thank
Okay.
you. It's great. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.